Greetings. Today on Richard Doesn't Play Factorio Correctly, I'm documenting the base I've built that's entirely around sushi belts. Um, for context, I built this back in version 0.15, and then I just migrated it to 0.18, and I'm still working out some kinks from that upgrade, and honestly just remembering what's changed. But I think it's a really innovative base. Sushi belts are oftentimes the bane of existence for most people who play Factorio, but I like the elegance of just putting everything on one bus. Here is the classic sushi belt area, which is the science, although right now I have the factory turned off effectively. I've built my base around a demand-driven system. Typically, Factorio is more supply-oriented because you just keep pushing supply through. I've built this to be demand oriented, and since I haven't done any research in the last half hour, the base shut itself down because there's no demand. I also disabled my replenishment of my defenses in order to stress this case that the base shuts down automatically if there's no demand. So, to get into the nuance of the actual demand logic that I have going forward, each assembler or research area has a cache area, so like a wooden chest, and this is for holding the materials that are required to run the assembler or the research, and furthermore allows you to look at that and see what is missing. So here I have a constant combinator, and so this just sets a base offset. So this is a demand. So effectively, I want 10 of each science available to this lab. This is connected in addition to the wooden chest. You can see that the wooden chest right now has approximately, well, I haven't built any gold science recently, but since all of these are here, the minus 10 plus this assortment effectively negates the demand for this research lab. In order to run this filter inserter, we go through this combinator, which is just applying a -1. So since this is -10, if this chest was empty, the sum would be -10 still. And then this would invert it so that it would be a positive request on the filter inserter. So that means that the filter inserter is searching for everything based on this demand. And right now, this specific area wants the space science pack, which I don't have an assembly line built for, and then the yellow, which I guess I don't have running. In order to turn that into a global demand, I actually have different levels of networks. So to separate this localized green network with a more broad demand network, I have this red line coming off here. So this is going to have the equivalent signal as this green one, but there's no like backfeed. So if we hover over and look on the right hand side of the screen, you can see that my science area has the demand of I want 20 gold, 90 white, and then everything else I've satisfied in the demands. This red line is a little bit special because it's science, and I treat this slightly special, is attached to a click. It's attached to these telephone poles that runs all the way vertically along the base. So I believe the next area is kind of happenstance, but it's going to produce blue. So this green line, or the red line from up here, it comes, and then along the top of this region is the science bus. So this telephone tower sees it has the same demand as this one up here. So that's the global demand for science, which is currently satisfied. And it would, for some reason, blue's not present. I must be perfectly matched for blue. And if there was a demand for blue, then it would come down here and start asking for blue science to be produced from the factory. So right now I'm missing ingredients. But if I wanted the blue science, then it would start getting produced there. To get raw materials, I also have another sushi belt set up, although because there's a lot of saturation and it's pretty much steel, or what's this, steel plate and then copper plate get consumed by most items. I have this raw material line that will send in. It also brings in the liquids in barrel system. I do have a dedicated barreling facility over here. So let's turn on the base and see what happens. Do some new research. Since I just upgraded, I have some pretty glitchy science. I've got a bunch of I have a bunch of green science stocked, but I don't have this green science tech. I think I have all the science required for this. So let's press start. We will see that all the science areas are running. They're actually pulling out of this cached crate of science. Where the hell did I produce gold science? Oh, up here. Should be a request for gold science. Why is there no flying robot frames? I didn't set up any factories to build it. Set current price. I need flying robot frames. That one. And the recipe, I'll jot down on a piece of papers. Okay. So I'm going to update this. So I'm actually going to start doing much larger buffers. Go. What else will this need? It will need low density structure. I want this guy to build low density structure. I probably can't build it yet. I haven't researched it, as the game's broken. Alright. So I might not be able to finish this science, but I can still discuss what's happening. The localized demand for this belt gets converted into a global demand with this combinator. And all this is taking every single input, multiplying by 1, and outputting. And this just separates the red local network for this bus to this green global demand bus. So if you look, this is everything that I've demanded right now, and then also items that are mismatched. So like I'm not going to produce any more green circuit boards because there's minus 9 demand for it. While there's positive demand, so it looks like steel has positive demand, we can see the steel running, steel inserters down here. They're all connected to the network requesting steel. And there's some pollution on the belts. I try to keep this area clean in regards to being mostly raw materials, but there is this one item that will take out of... This is my junk area. Oh, I guess I should explain this. So in order to move from the local build area, which I try to kind of keep separated, so like this is for building green science. This is for building raw materials, and I also have my red science on this line. In order to move materials between these, I've got some vertical lines. So I have a dedicated science line. That's pretty straightforward. But then also I have these, which act as trash. I've been trying to update, but this is still obsolete, where it's just grabbing a little bit of everything. I've been trying to do filter inserters there. In fact, I can even set that up now. Go down. Filter inserters. So we're going to attach this to the local network. we are going to set filters and we're going to blacklist. Because when I built this, I didn't have the blacklist option. So that's a fancy new feature. Filters, blacklist. So if there's anything on the belt that's not needed locally, it's going to get put into this line, which has stalled, ruining my beautiful tech demo. Why the hell has it stalled? I'm still demanding these advanced engines, red engines. See that I never set these correctly. So before I get distracted, here in the garbage area, I actually have separate boxes for all the items. And so it can come through, and as long as the belts move, I don't know why it's stalled, it'll get picked up and held in like this buffer. And then in the future, if I do demand like more steel, this will start pulling off very quickly, get put back into population. Filters. Probably one of the biggest problems with this is how tedious all the circuit stuff is. My global demand look. Only thing I'm requesting are 50 motors. So they're getting separated, the ones that I pulled out of reserve, just by the nature of these splits. But I also have a sorter pulling onto this return circuit. And so as it moves up, it should end up in the up here. And so this is pulling any advanced or red engines off of these belts. So as soon as they arrive, like they're coming up here, they get pulled off and consumed by the machine. And once this hits, I believe I set it to 50. Yeah. Once it hits 50 and there's no more demand for this, whatever this is called, flying robot frame, it will stop requesting those engines. Most people would be really frustrated with this because it is relatively slow. Areas that are not being used get shut down. I really like the elegance of that. I think it better represents a modern lean manufacturing factory. The classic example of lean manufacturing is the Kanban system, where you don't build parts unless there's a request for the parts. And so here, everything is supposed to be like, if we don't have science cached, then we create a query for the science, and that runs the science factories, which then create a query for their raw materials, and it should all trickle back. The idea when I first built this was also that it should be very repeatable. And so, to some degree, it works. So, like, you can just keep adding more assembly lines farther north. And they're all relatively the same. You can go to each of these factories, switch, like, if you don't need many more, what are these? Speed modules. If you have too many speed modules, you could come here, reset the requirements, reset what you're making, reset the filter on the output, and that will publish to the grid or the global request that yes, I've switched the material that I'm making here, and it will just kind of flow into this loop and then get pulled off into the trash loop, and then it will get picked off that trash loop further down wherever it's required. So, for example, what I was just doing with these engines, they were coming over to this assembly line where they're needed for the flying robot suit. There's some serious issues, and one of the reasons why I stopped playing Factorio back in 0.15 was because of what I considered bugs, but I guess would be feature requests. There's an issue with filter inserters that there's only 5 items limited. So when this factory is running nonstop, you'll have 10 different things requested on the global, the green bus. And so the demand for low numbered items will actually not get populated through. On my global line, I'm now at 5 different items, 6 different items. So there's request for 6, 7 items. However, if we look at one of my filter inserters, they only support 5 items. And so this is one of the issues with this. I have this request right now, it's only 5, but yeah, items don't get added to the filter request. And if you pay attention to the filter inserter request versus the green request, the most requested is 1,000 um, magazines. However, the way that the filter inserter works is that these are prioritized based on the number of the item just in your inventory. Like each item has a unique identifier and it's invisible to the player, but I think it's kind of archaic. It's probably by how it was added to the game. So like these are relatively low numbers in the item number. And so these filter inserters, they will only handle up to 5 and they'll prioritize these low items. So what you can get is you can get the demand, you can have a demand for 10 items, and the item that you need to finish a recipe doesn't get delivered. And so the factory has to shut down until that item's delivered. I even made a feature request or bug request on the Factorio forums. The other big item is the latency in these demands. So like right now, I'm trying to fill this crate with 1,000 magazines. And this is actually going to work pretty well. But as this line is producing, you can see the steel is coming on and off really quickly. When there's demand for steel, the steel area is producing as fast as possible. And so consequently, you actually get more steel than requested because it takes a while for the steel to wrap around and get delivered to this belt, which then wraps around and gets delivered to these crates where the demand is sourced. The whole time that that steel is traveling, there's still requests for steel occurring. Now, while we're in steady state, it's not that big of a deal, but it does add a lot of steel on the belts that can actually saturate. And so consequently, you have to upgrade. Even for this low volume of production, I'm using the red belts and blue belts elsewhere because you really need that high throughput for this type of factory to work. Now, I don't think I'm going to give up on this base. I think it's really cool. And even if I just leave this area running with minor tweaks, it produces science. We will finish researching this eventually. Sushi base kind of works, kind of doesn't work. It works better than a lot of people say, as long as you're willing to be patient with these wires.